Hello, my name is Brianna Jenkins, recent MA graduate from the University of Exeter. This poster is the edited version of the submitted MA thesis. Therefore, the images and information were the result of research and experiments made within the United States. The main goal of this project was to investigate the usage of the Minoan pottery vessel known as the Scored Basin through experimentation and research from Late Minoan Crete on Moklos. To begin, the Bronze Age on Crete was a time of flourishment in agriculture, pottery production, and other specializations. Pottery production is one of the most important elements of everyday life for the Minoans, and many examples still survive archaeologically. This harbor site of Moklos depicted here contained various buildings for the community, craftsmen, and production. As presented through the excavations of Moklos, the scored basins were located throughout various rooms, and this may give it an idea on what their form and possible functions were. There has been various speculation into the classification of time period within the Minoan civilization. Therefore, here one can see a general breakdown of the separate division of periods. However, for this study, there is a heavy concentration on the Late Minoan period, often known as the Neopalatial, which lies within the Postpalatial division. Within this period, there are also subcategories, LM1A, NB, 2, and 3. In particular, LM1B is the concentration of the three aspects of this project, the Mudbrick, the Scored Basin, and the Minoan Kiln. The Mudbrick went through one pilot test in order to figure out the right raw materials. As a result, clay was locally sourced as well as processed with sand and water. The clay took 10 minutes to dig up, and the mixing would average between 45 minutes to an hour. Once mixed and formed into bricks, they were left to sunbake and rotated every 3 days until the construction of the kiln. While the process of the mud bricks and the kiln were underway, the Scored Basin prototype was constructed. In doing so, research was completed in order to understand how they could have possibly been made and their possible function. Within Moklos, these ceramic vessels were found within the artisans' quarter, a series of workshops in Haliminori, the farmhouse. These scored basins were described as being large vessels with wide open mouths and flat bottoms, as well as having interior scoring, which is described as X-shaped, has caused them to be described as beehives because of the honeycomb comparison. However, some suggest that based on where they have been found in Moklos, there may have been a tie into food production or storage. Therefore, using IB-270 as an archaeological source, the coil-technique was used to construct the large scored basin. 2 pilot tests were made from stoneware and red clay, which was used to refine the coil-technique itself. In doing so, the large basin was made from 30 pounds of purchased clay and had a total of 55 coils and approximately 15 to 16 inches long at 2 centimeters in thickness. This portion of the experiment took a total of 10 to 11 hours of work amongst a 3-day time span. Another element of this experiment was to create a Minoan kiln based on the evidence found within the artisans' quarter on Moklos. The kiln itself took 2 months with a total of 197 bricks, which in combination with clay mortar weighed 1,085 pounds. The kiln constructed was used from the inspiration and research made by the 2 kilns at the artisans' quarter, Kiln A for the measurements and Mudbrick suggestion, and Kiln B for the proposed function as well as the idea of the temporary dome. This idea of creating a temporary dome was proven difficult during their construction. Multiple pilot tests were made in figuring out how to cover the kiln without fully sealing it up. So the top was left uncovered so that the vessels could go in from there, and then an industrialized kiln lid was put on top of it. Not the most authentic way, but due to timing and weather, it was needed. Therefore, the last portion of the experiment was to fire the kiln. Using birch, pear, oak, pine, and hydrangea wood to go in from the bottom of the kiln, it would reach a temperature of 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. Given the evidence of the archaeological record from Moklos, the temperature that seemed to be held within a kiln was at least 600 degrees Celsius / 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. So this was exactly what was needed and was used during both firings. Interestingly enough, all parts of the experiment were successful except for the most important part, the fired scored basin. The kiln was able to withstand the high temperatures more than expected, but because of the clay that was purchased, the ceramic vessel was not able to transform into a finished piece. However, final thoughts. Number 1. This vessel took a long time to build and is a very large one at that, so its purpose would have to be of some importance. Number 2. Being as though it is large, a required size kiln would have been needed in order to properly fire it. Number 3. Seeing as how these vessels seem to be found archaeologically within communal, agricultural, and workspaces, there is a suggestion that they did not have just one use, but a desired upon one use the producer made. Lastly, even though the experiment did not go as originally planned, there will still be continuous research and production into these basins in order to completely understand them. I would like to conclude by thanking everyone for their support. Last but not least, I would like to thank EXARC for accepting my poster. Thank you for listening today.